Today, we're diving into an absolutely game-changing book on leadership. It's called Turn the Ship Around by L. David Marquet, who's a former U.S. Navy captain. And look, this is so much more than a typical business book. It is the true story of how one leader took the traditional command and control model and just completely flipped it on its head. So let's get right into it. The entire book, really, it all comes down to this one powerful question. It just fundamentally challenges that old school idea that a leader's job is to have all the answers and just tell people what to do. Marquis says, hey, that model isn't just a little inefficient, it is completely broken.
So the setting for this whole experiment was the USS Santa Fe, a nuclear-powered submarine. And when Captain Marquet took command, it was, by pretty much every single metric, the worst-performing submarine in the entire U.S. Navy. I mean, morale was at rock bottom, and performance, well, that was even lower. So what Marquet figured out was just profound. The crew, you see, they weren't lazy or incompetent or anything like that. They were actually suffering from something called learned helplessness. For years, the system had trained them to do one thing and one thing only: wait for orders. Any little spark of initiative, any idea they had, was systematically just snuffed out. It turned them into world-class experts at being followers. It didn't take him long to realize the problem wasn't his people, not at all. The problem was the leadership system that they were all trapped inside. He understood that just trying to be a better, more inspiring commander inside that broken system wouldn't change a thing. He had to change the entire system itself. And this, right here, this is the model that was causing all the trouble. The classic leader-follower model. You can just picture a pyramid, right? All the information flows up to that one person at the very top, and all the decisions and commands flow back down. Well, this creates a massive bottleneck. The entire organization's potential is limited to the brain power and bandwidth of that one single person. It is a single point of failure. And when you put the old and new models side by side, the difference is just, it's night and day. On the left, you've got the old way, a leader who takes control, which creates dependency and limits the whole organization to just one thinker. But on the right, you see the new way, a leader who gives control, creating more leaders and just unleashing the potential of the entire team. The goal is no longer a crew that follows orders perfectly, it's to have a crew that doesn't need orders in the first place. So Marquette's solution to all this was what he called the leader-leader model. And you can think of it as a framework specifically designed to push decision-making, to push ownership, down to every single level of the organization. It's about turning every crew member into a leader in their own right. Now, the leader-leader model is built on three pillars that all depend on each other. It starts with control, which means giving up authority and pushing it down to where the information actually is. But, and this is absolutely critical, you can't just give away control without first ensuring competence. You have to build up the technical skill and mastery before you hand over the reins. And finally, you have to provide absolute clarity about the mission so that every decision made by anyone is perfectly aligned with the organization's ultimate goal. You know, a huge part of building that competence is psychological, and the leader has to be the one to go first. By publicly admitting mistakes, or even just saying, you know what, I don't know, the leader sends a powerful signal that learning is way more important than appearing perfect. This creates a culture where it's safe for everybody to learn and to grow instead of trying to hide what they don't know. Okay, so this might be the most famous and, honestly, the most practical tool in the entire book. Marquet figured out that you can completely change how people think and act just by changing a few words. His advice is to start with language, not with some big, scary reorganization. This is it. This is the magic phrase. Crew members were no longer allowed to ask for permission. So instead of saying, "Captain, permission to submerge the ship," they had to state their intention. "Captain, I intend to submerge the ship." It seems like such a tiny, insignificant change, right? But its effects were absolutely massive. The reason "I intend to" works so well is that it completely shifts the psychological ownership. See, to state your intent, you first have to think through the entire action, you have to consider all the variables, and you have to take personal responsibility for that decision. In other words, you have to think like a captain. It moves all that cognitive work from the leader to the team, and it builds those decision-making muscles with every single repetition. So how can you actually apply these lessons?
Well, the principles that transformed a nuclear submarine are pretty universal because they tap into basic human needs for autonomy, for mastery, and for purpose. It honestly doesn't matter if you're in tech or healthcare or education, this stuff works. Here's a kind of quick start guide right from Marquette's playbook. First, start with those small language changes, like I intend to. Next, always remember, build competence before you give away control. Constantly talk about the why behind the work. Be the first one to admit you don't have all the answers. And finally, if there's a problem with performance, always look at your system first, not just your people. And the results? They were just stunning. The USS Santa Fe went from being dead last in the fleet's performance rankings to #1. And here's the kicker. This happened with the exact same crew. It is the ultimate proof that performance is a result of the system you create, not just the individuals you have. When the system changed to support leadership and ownership, the crew's real potential was finally unleashed. In the end, Marquet is really arguing for a whole new definition of leadership. It's not about being the hero or the person in the spotlight. True leadership is about building a system, a culture of leaders that's so strong, so robust, that it continues to thrive long after you've left. And guess what? The Santa Fe continued to win awards and produced a record number of new commanders for years after Marquet was gone, proving the system truly worked. So let's end this with a challenge for you. Forget about a massive overhaul for a minute. Just think about one thing. What is one small decision, one tiny piece of control that you can push down to your team tomorrow to start building your own culture of leaders?